Union Minister Jitendra Singh, the Minister of State for the Department of Personnel and Training, has written a letter. It's an undated letter, but a letter to the chairperson of the UPSC, the Union Public Service Commission, asking for the recent advertisement of the 17th of August, carried prominently in almost every newspaper, published on commissioned by the UPSC, asking for entries for the recruitment to 45 posts. These were posts at the level of joint secretaries, deputy secretaries, and directors, etc., in the central government. The union minister has asked for these for the advertisement to be withdrawn. These were, as they're called, lateral entries into the civil service. Now, this is a very significant move for various reasons. One, the UPSC advertisement had triggered a huge political row with members from the opposition as well as members from within the NDA coalition, the ruling central coalition, asking for withdrawal of this sort of lateral entry, which they claimed, they asserted, was against the spirit of social justice. Because when you have lateral entry does not have a, uh, reservations for the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, as is mandated for employment, public employment in other spheres, the regular recruitment by various government departments. And so there was a huge row over this. The Congress, other members of the India Alliance, repeatedly mentioned how this was against the spirit of the Constitution. They red flagged this advertisement, calling it another example of the BJP, of the Prime Minister, and the central government's uh, assault on the Constitution, assault on the issue of social justice, on reservations. The BJP ally, Mr. Chirag Paswan, who's also a union minister, went on record saying this is an absolutely wrong move by the UPSC. The JDU, also an ally of the BJP, had also criticized lateral entry and said that they will ask the center to revisit this. Now, the letter that has been sent to the UPSC chairperson Preeti Sudan by MOS Jitendra Singh makes a few significant points. One, of course, it asks the UPSC to withdraw the advertisement and put on hold the lateral entry scheme as of now, the for the 45 posts that were, for which recruitment was to be carried out. More significantly, it talks about reservations in public employment being a cornerstone for social justice as far as the Prime Minister's view is concerned. It also mentions that the UPSC must, in the future, consider review and reform of the lateral entry scheme, uh, possibly indicating that while the current advertisement has been withdrawn, there is scope for this being reissued, but with a provision for reservation. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. In what format it will happen, we don't know. But at least there is a hint in the letter from the union minister to have a review of this sort of lateral entries in UPSC recruitments, and of possibly bringing in an element of reservations there. And finally, it talks about how lateral entry came to be. And it mentions how this was a key recommendation of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, which was constituted when the UPA was in power. And senior Congress leader, Mr. Veerappa Moily, was the uh, was the chairperson of that commission. And it was based on the recommendations of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission. That lateral entry, although it existed previously also, but became more mainstreamed in recruitments. The purpose of mentioning the second Administrative Reforms Commission obviously is to tell the opposition and the people at large that this is not something that the Modi government has come up with. This is something that has existed earlier, and it is something that had been endorsed by the opposition, which today is crying foul on the issue of lateral entry, calling it anti-reservation, anti-constitution. But there's another important element, an important political element on that goes beyond the immediate issue of withdrawal of that advertisement, which is that this is now the fourth instance in the last month alone of the Narendra Modi government having to either take a step back on something on an important issue that they had announced, important legislation that they wanted to bring, or an important policy announcement. The fourth such instance in the last 1 month alone. You had during the union budget the finance minister announcing the removal of indexation and the hike in the LTCG, the long-term capital gains. On that, the center, there was a lot of hue and cry by the opposition that it was anti-middle class, it was anti-invest sentiment, it was anti-people, and the government had to dilute its stand there. Then you also had the government bring in the Waqf Amendment Bill. This was again a bill that the BJP government had been working on for quite some time. The Federal had, in fact, carried an exclusive story in October last year, saying that this was very much on the agenda for the Modi government. But then that bill came to Parliament, it was introduced, and it was sent to a joint parliamentary committee for further scrutiny. The government did not, as it did in the last 10 years, it did not brazen the criticism, it did not bulldoze that bill through Parliament. Then you had the other issue of the Broadcast Regulation Services Bill. That bill, again, was something that the government had wanted to bring, but then it very quietly withdrew the draft bill and has now said that there will be further public consultations on that. And now the advertisement for lateral entry. What does this suggest? Very simply put, it suggests that the government in its third term is no longer in a position to bulldoze the decisions that it wants. The reasons for it are obvious. You have a much more robust opposition. The lateral entry issue, the Waqf bill, the indexation and LTCG issue, as well as the broadcast regulation bill. All of these were issues on which the opposition and the public at large, and in some cases, even the alliance partners of the BJP raised a red flag. They criticized those decisions, and the government has had to take a step back. As we all know, this is not a government which enjoys the sort of majority that the BJP enjoyed on its own in 2014, or the period from 2014 to 2019, and then 2019 to 2024. It's a government in which the BJP is in a minority. It is dependent on its allies, and it's a government that has a much stronger opposition in Parliament, particularly the Lok Sabha, compared to what it had over the last decade. And so, for the government to bulldoze decisions, to have its way without taking into consideration the criticisms that are coming of its policies, of its legislation, is no longer an option. It also shows that there are greater checks and balances on the government now than there were over the last decade. And perhaps it shows that the Prime Minister is no longer on as strong a footing as he was over the last 10 years. The lateral entry move, of course, also had another important element, and one must never forget that any decision that this government takes, it always weighs in when it has to take a step back. It will naturally weigh in the political repercussions of that decision, and naturally also the political repercussions of taking back such a decision. The lateral entry move, as I mentioned earlier, was something that the opposition had gone to town, dubbing as being anti-social justice, anti-Dalits, anti-tribals, anti-OBC, anti-constitution. That's a narrative that the BJP had found very difficult to combat even during the Lok Sabha campaign, because assault on the constitution, the bid to do away with reservation was part of the narrative that the India bloc had gone to polls with. Now, this move again brings back that narrative, and at a time when the BJP had to face elections, has to face elections in Jammu and Kashmir and Haryana, which have already been announced, which will be through the month of September. And then a month after that, perhaps, although the schedule has not yet been announced by the Election Commission, the BJP has to face elections in Maharashtra and Jharkhand. Maharashtra, a very important state where the BJP is on a weak footing as of now, is also a state that has a very strong presence, formidable presence of Dalit voters as well as OBC voters. Jharkhand, a state that has a very strong vote base of Dalits, of tribals, and of OBCs, backward classes. Haryana, again, strong presence of Dalits and backward castes. So these are all states where the government, the BJP would have had to uh, explain its position on lateral entry had it had not taken back that, had it not instructed the UPSC to take back that advertisement. And the opposition would have naturally got a chance to revive its plan of the government being and the BJP being anti-constitution and anti-OBC and anti-Dalit, anti-tribal. As I mentioned, the letter has a hint uh, of the possibility in the future of reservations being introduced even in lateral entry. We don't know, as I said, how that would be made possible. But since the Union Minister of State for Personnel has asked the UPSC chairperson to review and reform lateral entry, keeping in mind social justice, the BJP would perhaps take a high moral ground even in this sort of defeat by claiming that the recommendations which we followed for lateral entry were based uh, on the report of a commission that was formed during the UPA government, and it was the Congress and the UPA government that did not consider social justice while pushing for lateral entry. And it is now that, because, as the letter mentions, that for the Prime Minister, reservations in public employment is a cornerstone uh, for social justice, the BJP will naturally say, or possibly try to say, that the government is alive to the challenges, it is alive to the complications of lateral entry, and uh, it will try and rectify the wrongs that have been done by the Congress, thereby uh, forcing the Congress also to clarify why, when they were in power, they allowed lateral entry without considering reservations. So it's an interesting development today, one that we will keep an eye on, because this is not certainly not the end for this. Uh, Whether it comes back, it comes, and if it comes back in some different form, what position the government takes, what position the opposition takes, will all be important. But as I mentioned, it's also another signal in the last 1 month of the government not being able to have its way with important decisions. As things move forward, we will see how this pans out politically for the BJP.